As a new legislative session begins, what does Arizona's business community want to see? We'll talk with the head of the state's Chamber of Commerce. Democrats enter the session in the minority in both chambers. So what can they hope to accomplish?
This, my friends, is our Arizona promise.
And our panel looks back at the governor's State of the State address. Can she keep any of her promises? That's all ahead on Politics Unplugged. Good evening, I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. As the new legislature gets underway, the state's economy always a top priority. So what is the business community's agenda this year? Here to talk about that is Danny Seiden, the president and CEO of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much for stopping by here. So what is it? What does the chamber want out of this legislature, this governor this year?
You know, Dennis, what the business community wants to see is a legislature that's focused on keeping the great momentum that Arizona's had. We've had win after win in terms of our economy. We have the fastest growing manufacturing sector in the entire country right now. So we want to see them focus on the policies that further the economy, avoid the distractions or anything else. Let's just work on making sure every Arizonan can, get a high paying job, afford a house, and prosper here in our state.
So what's a distraction?
So, I mean, honestly, I think anything that would pull us away from focusing on things like, we'll say, energy and infrastructure right now. We have a fantastic grid. It's been reliable. This session, you'll see a bill called securitization, which allows, our public utilities to use existing assets to refinance, putting more capital and investment into our grid without raising ratepayers' money. So it's fantastic. It's a good idea. We'll be very supportive of that. We want to see them focus on keeping, the great reputation that we have. We were a 4-sport town a year ago. If I did this interview a year ago, we had 4 sports. We have 3 right now. And we're at risk of going down to 2, Dennis. So this session, we're working with Representative Jeff Wenninger on how to make sure the Diamondbacks can reinvest in their stadium, which is a public asset, so it makes sense to continue to keep the Diamondbacks here as well. Yeah,
but we also said the reason why we lost one of those sports franchises, the hockey franchises, because Tempe voters were like, we're not putting up any more taxpayer dollars or any resources to help billionaires with their teams.
100% understand that, but this is a different team, different ownership, and a different agreement. The county is the owner of that building, of that stadium, so it's a public asset that we're reinvesting into.
Yeah, and not to go too deep on this, on the sport ball talk here, because this is a politics show. But would there be any more taxpayer money spent to keep the Diamondbacks in town? And really, would they leave, or is this just kind of an idle threat?
No, it's not an idle threat at all. You have Utah trying to take that team, offering real money. What we're doing is trying to use, again, the tax deal that they had is expiring, create a new one, continue to reinvest into that public asset.
All right, another big item from the governor, we heard from the State of the State speech earlier to start off the week. She talked about lowering the costs of childcare. And my understanding is a public-private partnership, so that tells me that your people have a hand in working with the governor on this. What's it look like, and what's the hopes of being able to do what the governor wants, which is to lower costs of childcare by 2/3?
We agree with that goal. Dennis, the cost of childcare in Arizona is unsustainable. We have an affordability and an availability problem. So 2 big problems in our childcare market. Right now, the cost of a toddler, average cost of a toddler childcare in Arizona is around $22,000, $23,000. Who can afford that? So I think the governor is showing leadership and talking about State of the State. We've been working with her on what ideas work, what plans could work. But it's more than just a public-private partnership. We're talking about finding the companies that are already investing in this, incentivizing them to grow their programs. We're talking about, are there regulations and liability issues that prevent these community and kinship child cares in your neighborhoods? So we're going to work with the legislature and work with the governor to help address this big Arizona issue.
Well, and public-private partnership is also another way of saying businesses would have to kick in some money on this. How much of an appetite is that with your members to be kicking in money to help lower these costs for everyday Arizonans?
Arizona is losing, on average, about $1.7 billion annually from their economy because of childcare issues, people having to miss work, people not feeling safe where their kids are. So our businesses are investing in this, and they would always fund something that works for their employees and works for their workforce, which again is why we're also just going to transition to education. Prop 123 extension.
I was going to say, don't businesses at least owe parents something back for all the tax cuts they've gotten over the years?
I would say businesses want their employees to feel safe where their kids are. They want them to be able to be raised, in in an environment where they can, again, feel comfortable going to work and having adequate childcare for them.
All right, you wanted to talk a little bit about education. That's always a top priority. I always remind our viewers it's over 40% of the state budget and state spending every single year. It is a big deal in there. Let's talk about ESAs, the voucher program. Where's the business community on this? Because you know, it is draining a lot of money from the state budgets to go for people to send their kids to these private schools.
Right. Thanks for the question about ESAs. You know, traditionally, my board so far has not taken a full position on them, but I'll tell you what my board does support is putting as much money in through K-12 education without raising taxes, which is why we were the champions of Prop 123 10 years ago. Prop 123 is set to expire, working with the legislative leadership and the governor's office on making sure we get an extension, because that's billions of dollars into K-12 education right now. The ESA question is a very hot topic. It's still being debated. I think there's kinks in the policy all the way around, so we'll see how that plays out. Right now, have yet to weigh in on that, but we will weigh in very heavily to get Prop 123 going.
Would they weigh in, and we'll get to 123 here in just a second, would they weigh in, the business chamber, would they weigh in on capping this program, the ESA program, in terms of incomes? I mean, does somebody who is making $500,000 a year, do they really deserve taxpayer help to send their kids to private schools?
Yeah, the means testing is an interesting issue. That was there, you know, when the program was initiated. But so far, my members have not raised that. But again, we always watch the health of the state budget closely, because we don't want to see other priorities have to go by the wayside if a program and a policy is not right. But again, I think it's still early. It's in its infancy, and I think there'll be a lot of changes for ESAs.
So let's talk about Prop 123. That was money that was passed several years ago under the Ducey administration. I believe you were still in the office at that time. It was narrowly passed. And what it does, it transfers money out of the state land trust and puts it into education coffers, set to expire in June unless it's put back on the ballot and the voters reauthorize it before then. What's going to happen there? What are you guys planning to do to get this legislature to put this on the ballot and then eventually to pass it?
You know, what's very interesting is this legislature seems very focused on extending Prop 123 with the condition that the money go to the teachers. And that's a tough policy to work out on a statewide constitutional amendment, because, as you noted, it comes from our land trust. Our land trust is designed to fund education. It was always funding at a very low percent. Governor Doug Ducey came on and said, we can raise this percentage and put more money into K-12 education. So that's why we're going to do that and continue that. But this legislature wants to see it go directly to teachers. They want to get Arizona out of that conversation of we pay teachers bottom 5 in the country, bottom 2 in the country. You know, Representative Matt Gress, Senator J.D. Mesnar, they want to see that go up. They want to see us cross that. I think the Democrats have a shared passion. I think the teachers union, I think the business community, it'd be a great bragging point for us. We'll get the policy right.
I think Republicans would love to take the narrative away from Democrats that they're the ones that support teachers. But if you talk to a lot of teachers, they'll say it takes more than just teachers to educate kids. 100%. And I think Democrats want to see that money spread out to administrative staff and support staff out there. Why not support that?
Well, the first Prop 123 did, and I was very supportive, you know, as you noted in the governor's office. But I'll tell you what, if the passion is to get more money to teachers, that could free up some other money as well to go to, you're right, the classroom aides, everyone else who makes a school possible. We want as much money going to K-12 education as possible.
All right, and we're running out of time, but I do got to end up on this. What's the business want to see on immigration? Obviously, the business community always seen as being criticized because they'll say business depends on low, sometimes illegal labor to make their books balance.
First, I can tell you, every one of my members complies with E-Verify, and they hire legal immigration. And that's what we want to see, Dennis. We want to see more legal immigration. There's been a lot of misinformation out there about these H-1B1s, these highly skilled workers. These are not stealing jobs. These are jobs we need filled. And we've always been able to answer our labor needs with immigration until we're at this influx moment where they have to settle the illegal immigration process so we can get back to increasing legal immigration.
All right, Danny Seiden with the President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for stopping by. And still ahead, Democrats remain in the minority this session, so what can they hope to accomplish? We'll talk with the House Minority Leader when Politics Unplugged continues. Welcome back to Politics Unplugged. Democrats had high hopes of gaining control of at least one of the chambers of the legislature, but fell short. So what can they get done as the minority party? And here to talk about that is State Representative Oscar de Los Santos, the House Minority Leader. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And yeah, you guys did fall short. I know that's really disappointing. And we'll get into what you guys hope to accomplish this year, but I do want to get your initial reactions. Governor laid out her agenda, State of the State address at the beginning of the week. You got a preview of her budget plans on how she plans to pay for all this.
Right.
What's your take right now?
I think Governor Hobbs did a fantastic job at the State of the State. She's focused on the exact same issues that Arizona House Democrats are, namely affordability, affordability, affordability. Everywhere Arizonans turn, they're getting fleeced, frankly. Housing costs are out of control. Childcare costs are ballooning. Healthcare insurance corporations are making money hand over fist, and yet people are having a hard time getting basic medical care. So what we're focused on is working with Governor Hobbs to make sure that life is affordable for Arizonans. We're going to slash childcare costs by 2/3, and we're going to build more housing so that we can bring down housing costs.
Yeah, and how does the Democrats in the minority help the governor with that? Because you just don't have the number. You have fewer numbers than you had last year. I mean, that's just a fact. And we know that, Republicans, they agree, you all agree with a lot of the same issues, but it's how you accomplish it. And you brought up housing. Republicans look at, the local level as the way to solve the issue, to remove restrictions and regulations, to spur more building that increases the supply, which lowers costs. Democrats see it as very different, at least this Democratic governor does. She actually called out investors and the short-term rentals out there. How do you think this gets solved?
Well, here's the beautiful part is that the Republican caucus is very fractured. The far-right Freedom Caucus simply doesn't agree with their...
And Democrats aren't fractured at all?
Democrats are united. And so you've seen it over and over again, Dennis. When it came to Prop 400, the biggest investment in infrastructure, the Republicans fractured. It was Democrats who saved the biggest investment in infrastructure in Arizona history. You saw it as well with the Arizona Commerce Authority, the biggest economic development agency. The far-right Freedom Caucus tried to kill it. Democrats saved it. So time and time again, Democrats are able to come in, use our power, flex our power, work with the governor, and find bipartisan solutions.
I've seen fractures with the Democratic Party. They say that you guys are united on everything. I mean, that's not true, correct?
Certainly, listen, we have our disagreements. But when it comes to affordability, childcare, housing, healthcare, we're on the same page.
But what about, let's talk about immigration. I mean, it seems that, I've heard a lot of chatter from people in your caucus that they're concerned about the governor getting ready for a re-election fight, is shifting more to the right on immigration, becoming more and more of a border hawk, per se, for lack of a better term. Where are you? Where's the caucus now on the priorities she laid out on immigration? Is she's going to expand her, her Operation Safe or Secure down there that patrols on the border, that goes after drugs coming across the border and illegal immigration?
We're looking for a balanced approach that cracks down on the cartels, takes fentanyl off the streets, but does so without engaging in mass deportations or racial discrimination. And frankly, that's what Governor Hobbs is doing. With the help of Democrats who invested millions and millions of dollars into taking fentanyl off the streets and cracking down on the cartels, she has gotten 8 million pills of fentanyl off the streets. That was a big announcement that came yesterday. Another $17 million investment into drug interdiction. So when it comes to border and public safety, it's the Democrats who are actually delivering, and it's Republicans who are all talk.
But you've also heard, and I was down about a week after the election, she was down in Nogales. She was asked about whether or not, about what she thought about the incoming administration in D.C., and she said she would be willing to work with them on certain things. Would you encourage this governor to work with Donald Trump?
Listen, if it makes sense, sure. But when it comes to anything involving mass deportation, that's off the table. Racial discrimination, it has to be off the table.
Okay, and so moving forward now, looking at the rest of the year, what for the caucus in the House, what are you guys beyond just the affordability stuff looking to accomplish this year?
We're really looking at education and water. We want to make sure that we pass Prop 123, which is a critical funding source for our public schools, which you talked about in your past segment. We're also looking at water. You have these big out-of-state corporations that are coming up, effectively stealing Arizona's water from Arizona families, Arizona local businesses, Arizona local farms. So we're going to be looking to pass measures that protect Arizona's water. Also, we're looking at the ESAs. I mean, this has become a $1 billion boondoggle. You have your taxpayer money being spent on luxury sewing machines and, get this, a flat earth curriculum. That's ridiculous, and every Arizonan should be outraged that their taxpayer dollars are being misspent this way.
To push back on that, Republicans would say, like, look, it's their parents' choice, that their kids are going to be educated at the school that best serves their needs.
and they are more than welcome to send their child to a private school using private money, not flushing taxpayer dollars down the drain by buying a flat earth curriculum. That's ridiculous.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about the abortion issue. Governor had mentioned that in her State of the State. Right. There's a couple of laws that are still on the books she looks at as still restrictive to getting access to that operation, to that procedure. Right. You know, what are you guys looking at? Any laws you looking at repealing immediately? Are you in agreement with the governor and what would you repeal?
100%. The voters spoke loud and clear this November when they passed Proposition 139, the Arizona for Abortion Access Act, enshrined it in our state constitution. There's still a couple laws on the books that I think are struck down by this constitutional amendment, but we've got to repeal them off the books. We've also got to look at protecting the right to contraception and protecting the right to IVF. We also have a very invasive abortion reporting law on the books where the government tracks abortions and publishes them. That's got to go.
And final question here, we're out of time. One of the top priorities for Republicans, and they've already introduced legislation, I believe Warren Peterson has, dealing with elections. They want to speed up the counting process. So Arizona has election results. They say they want that on election night. A big part of that is a deadline for when to drop off those early ballots. They would cut that off. You couldn't drop off your early ballot at a poll after the Friday before the election. Where are Democrats with this? Do you think there are improvements that can be done? And do you agree with the Republicans' prescription on how to solve them?
No. Arizonans want accurate elections, and they want the freedom to choose how they vote. And a recent poll I looked at showed that the vast majority of Arizonans want the ability to drop off their ballots when they choose to, and they don't want to disenfranchise themselves. So I think that's going to be off the table for Democrats. All
right. Thank you very much for stopping by here to talk about where you guys are going to be going this year. And up next, I'll be bringing in our panel to talk about all of this week's major headlines, including the governor's State of the State address. That's next on Politics Unplugged. Welcome back to Politics Unplugged. The governor laid out her goals for the year in her State of the State address, but how much can she actually accomplish working with a Republican-controlled legislature? Let's bring in our panel, Republican consultant Marcus Dellartino and Democratic consultant Don Penich. Thank you both for being here, and let's start with you, Don. Top line, you know, you're the Democrat here. What'd you think of the governor's speech that she laid out at the beginning of the week?
I thought it was a really strong speech. I think it was the speech of a leader who just wants to get to work and do the job that Arizonans want her to do. There was no grandstanding. You might even say, and I don't mean this poorly, it wasn't visionary. It wasn't about pushing the envelope. It was about saying, let's get some stuff done. She very much heard the clear message that voters sent. We just want you to solve some problems for us. And I hope that, you know, the Republican side of her legislature is on board with her.
Yeah, and I took away from that. She really clearly could read election results. I mean,
Absolutely.
She was like, you know, lowering costs for Arizonans. Yeah. She's sounding tougher on the border, so there's clearly some of that in there. From you, the Republican perspective, how is this being received by Republicans like you and others down at the legislature?
Well, first of all, I'd say her delivery was probably one of the best delivery speeches she's done. She's certainly smooth. You know, I think there's some things in these proposals that Republicans can certainly get behind, and I think the speech was engineered exactly to do that. There will be some moments of disagreement. There is no doubt about it. But I think, you know, when you look at things like getting rid of party houses.
That was probably one of the best lines in the speech when she said that Arizonans want houses for families, not party houses.
Right. You're looking for pay increases for DPS. You know, that's always a home run. Everybody knows they've got a recruitment issue, and frankly, I'm not too sure the 5% is enough. I think it's going to end up being more. Concentrating on the border was a big winner for Republicans. You know, a little tidbit that I picked up is that there's grants for Attorney General Mays to give out to local law enforcement to investigate head shops who are illegally selling marijuana to kids. So I'm a big fan of that proposal. And so I think that speech was intention was to look at those moments where they can agree. Certainly we're going to have some moments of disagreement, but 90% of it, I would say.
And that is the big question there. And what can she hope to accomplish? She talked about lowering childcare costs by 2/3 in a public-private partnership. Is that a non-starter for Republicans? Do you think she can get that across the finish line?
Well, I would hope so. You should ask the Republican whether they'll be on board with it, but it's certainly the type of issue that Arizonans are saying they want solved and that they want, both parties to work on. So I hope so. There will be things that she can't get done. There will not be movement on ESA, on those private school vouchers, no matter how egregious they are. This body is not going to give that to her. But there are, as you heard Danny saying at the beginning of the show, there are things in education that they should be able to get done. They should be able to get things done in affordable housing again. So, at the same time, I think it's going to be a weird session because on the same day, you hear Republicans saying that their #1 priority is to make sure she's not reelected. If that's your #1 priority and you're coming out and saying that, do you think that's what Arizonans want to hear? That's not what we sent you there for. So it's going to be weird, but I think that we will see some things get done.
Yeah, well, Donna asked the Republicans, so I'm asking the Republican here. How do you think Republicans are going to work with this lowering cost of childcare, this public-private partnership?
Well, remember I said that it was like 90% of it was probably workable. I'd probably put this in the 10%. And it reminds me a little bit of when we went through all-day K. And Republicans weren't a big fan of that. I think this is going to take a few years to do. I think that, Danny's head of the chamber. The chamber's clearly on board. I think that's the beginning of something. And it's the beginning of messaging that this is a bigger issue. Look, I've got childcare. It is expensive, I will tell you. But I think that this one's going to take a little bit longer than this session to sort of work through.
Yeah, and your governor also spent a lot of time talking about immigration. She specifically spent a lot of time talking about what she's already felt she's already accomplished on this issue. What do you see happening this year that she's going to push for more? She wants to expand her border programs and whatnot. What are you expecting out of this?
I think she has done a really impressive job of walking that line between not villainizing people, hardworking people, looking to do jobs we need done, looking to raise their families in a safe environment, but focusing on what is a problem across our state, which is fentanyl, which is drugs in our communities. And so she talked about the border as a problem that is solvable, that is within the scope of a state, that the state of Arizona can afford to do, which is not what some of the Republican, kind of mandates can be described as. And so I think that, and you heard, Minority Leader address this, that is something that Democrats will be on board with, probably.
Yeah, and do you think that she's going to be on board? Do you think Democrats will get on board? The sheriffs have been asking for about $100 million in preparation for the potentiality of the Border Security Act that passed earlier this year that allows local law enforcement to enforce federal immigration law. Do you think the funding will be there in case that happens?
I mean, I can't speak for everything they might do, so I don't know what to say on that one.
Let's talk about you. What do you think Republicans want out of immigration this year? It's going to be, I'm assuming it's going to be a lot tougher and further right than what the governor's proposing and talking about at this point.
Well, I think that's a fair guess. For Republicans, they're sort of looking at the national spotlight, right? You've got Donald Trump in the White House. You've got a Republican Congress, Senate, and House. I think that aids them as far as funding on border priorities. And so it's a big relief for those leaders, Republican leaders in the House and the Senate, because hopefully we'll get some relief on some of those things, like a facility to hold those in the for the ballot measure that passed, right? But I would argue that it would make more sense to just transfer them straight over to the feds rather than holding them in a state building.
All right, I'm going to have to end it right there, but thanks a lot for stopping by here. That is all the time we have, but be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged.